The first step in making this is to take the shells off the shrimp and devein the shrimp. Put the shells in here, discard the veins, which is really the intestinal tract. It's your shrimp. We're just going to put them in a little bowl here, put some cling film over them, and put them into the refrigerator to store until we're ready for them. The shells are going to go into a pan with some hot oil to begin making the fish stock. The pan is getting hot. We're going to add these shrimp shells and legs into it. It's about a tablespoon of vegetable oil in there. And we're going to cook these until they turn pink red, develop some flavor on them. Also, for some extra flavor, you can put a handful of chopped onion in there. You don't have to. Just helps the flavor a little bit in the end. Then a couple of minutes. Shells are starting to turn pink. We're going to add a little bit of paprika and a couple of bay leaves in here. This is about half a teaspoon of paprika. And keep stirring it and develop some good color on these before we continue. It's been another couple of minutes. This is looking good. Now we're going to add 350 mils of fish stock to this. Now, I'll be perfectly honest with you, this is a restaurant recipe, restaurant methods. We do not make our own fish stock most of the time. Put about a teaspoon and a half of this Knorr product that's an instant fish stock. It's much better than the consumer products that you're used to, but still it's not the same as fresh, that's true. But since this is a curry, has a lot of spices in it, the subtle difference between the fish stock that you make yourself and the packaged product mixed with some water, you'll never notice the difference. It's way in the background of the flavors. It will be lost. You're just putting yourself to too much work to make your own fish stock for this. You can if you want to, of course. Anyway, this simmers away for about 20 minutes. Then you strain it, cool it. That's going to become the stock that you use in the dish. Just keep it at a low simmer for about 20 minutes. The stock has been simmering for about 20 minutes now. They're going to pass it to a sieve. Push this down. Now what we have to do, measure this in a measuring cup or a scale and adjust it back up to 350 milliliters just by adding water to it. You want the volume to be 350 milliliters. That completes the stock portion of this. Now we move on to the next part. Now we're going to make the vegetable puree for this. We put red bell pepper, the red onion, garlic, all this into the cup for pureeing. You just chop this up coarsely. You got to get it started a little bit, otherwise the blades of the mixer won't work. And also putting a ginger puree in it, or rather grated ginger. The reason why I don't just put a piece of ginger in it is that the stick blender has a hard time blending up ginger very finely. It's a little bit too fibery for it. So we give it a head start by grating it into it. Also, when you grate ginger, you don't need to peel it. You can just peel it. You can just grate it with the peel. Also using red chili. Now, how much of this chili you add is obviously related to how hot you want it. But this curry isn't something that should be real fire hot. So I'm really not going to add very much chili to this at all. And then add about a quarter of a red chili. You can add more if you want to. I don't like this particular curry super hot. And then finally, the tomato sauce goes in here. And the whole thing gets pureed. It obviously take a few minutes. Now that the puree is ready, we're going to turn our attention to toasting the spices. I've assembled them all in a bowl, and I have a cast iron skillet that's starting to get hot. Skillet is hot. I'm going to add all these spices at once. We'll just shake them around a little bit until they become fragrant, aromatic. That's all we're looking for. Okay, they're done. And letting the spices cool down a little bit first in a bowl before we transfer them to the spice grinder, which is really a coffee mill that's been repurposed. And along with that, I'm going to add turmeric, which did not get toasted, and also some ground fenugreek. This also I did not toast. So now we're just going to pop the lid on this, give it a grind. After that's ground, we're going to put it into the sieve. We're going to shake it through. This will get rid of any clumps, especially that cinnamon. You don't want any big pieces in it. You want to get all the spice that you can through it, and it'll take a couple minutes to shake it through. And eventually you end up with some solids that just won't go through, and that's fine. That's what we're trying to get rid of. Now, this is the point we're going to add the saffron to this, because we don't want to mix up the saffron with the part that wouldn't go through. Otherwise we'd be leaving saffron behind in this, and saffron's very expensive. So we'll add the saffron only at this point. Just need a little pinch. So this is our spice mixture. We're going to use all of it in this dish. We have a pan on a medium heat, and I'm going to add to this a mixture of 30 grams of butter and 30 grams of vegetable oil. You can just use 60 grams. It's 2 ounces of ghee or clarified butter if you want. This is easier. It will work just fine in this recipe, even though traditionally you would use ghee. The mixture of butter and oil works equally well. We're going to make sure that this melts completely. There's no solid butter left in it anymore, and it stops foaming before we proceed. Okay, the foaming has subsided, and now this is a delicate operation. You have to pay attention and have everything ready. You're going to add all of the spices directly into this oil. Now, obviously they're going to burn real quick because they're powdered, and this oil is quite hot. So you just give them about 10 seconds. You just want to finish the toasting process, just about 10 seconds, and then you're going to cool it off with this vegetable mixture that you had before. And if you don't do that, if you add the vegetables first and you add the spices second, they will have what Indians describe as a raw spice flavor in the end. So this is one of the ways that you make sure that you don't end up with that, is you add the spices to the oil for just a few seconds first. Now we're going to stir this. This is going to cook for quite a few minutes. And at this stage, this is not something you can walk away from. You have to keep an eye on it and stir it every few seconds. If you want to reduce this, you want to get rid of all the extra moisture, but you do not want it to burn on the bottom at all. You do not want to scorch it. So it's going to require quite a bit of attention. About 10 minutes cooking time in all. One thing you can do between stirring this is to prep your spinach and your potatoes. You've got them cubed. Potatoes are cubed, sitting in some water. We'll drain those off just before we actually use them. And this is 125 grams of spinach. As you can see, it's a fair mountain of spinach. We're just going to give this a coarse chop. Meanwhile, we're still stirring this, making sure that it doesn't stick at all. It's on a medium heat. On a scale of 1 to 10, it's on 5. To be very, very careful not to burn this, but to cook it really well. It's been 10 minutes now, and what you start to see is oil is separating from this paste. That's the point that you want to reach. As soon as the oil begins to separate from it, it's ready for the next step. Here's the potatoes we cubed up, and those are going to go in, and it's going to become kind of a dry curry for a little bit, because this paste is going to get mixed around with the potatoes. Heat's going to stay on medium, on 5, and now we're going to cover it. Keep it like this for a few minutes to soften up those potatoes and get them to absorb that flavor. As this time goes by, You can open it up, make sure that nothing's scorching on the bottom, turn it around a little bit, scrape the bottom. But you want about 4 minutes to go by like this with the potatoes in there, nothing else, because those potatoes have to absorb that flavor or it won't be a coherent curry in the end. And it's been 4 minutes now. It's starting to stick to the bottom, which is okay. Nothing's burnt. It's just getting very dry. Now we're going to start deglazing this with the fish stock that we had earlier. We're going to add a little bit of this. Shrimp and fish stock, I should say. Deglaze the bottom of it. As you can see, nothing's burnt. It's just a nice fond in the bottom. And again, we're going to cover this up and let it cook for a couple more minutes. The key here is you really want the potato to absorb as much of this concentrated flavor as you can, so that the potato is very strongly flavored. It's been 3 more minutes. Take this off, and we're going to add the rest of the fish stock. There's a lot of steps in this recipe, I realize. So they're going to add also about a teaspoon of salt at this point. There's a lot of steps in this recipe. In fact, a friend jokingly said that this sort of cooking is why fast food was invented. The rest of the fish stock is in there. There's nothing stuck to the bottom of the pan. Now we're going to cover it partially. Leave it partially covered, partially open, and reduce the heat a little bit more. And keep this on a simmer. It's been about 10 minutes now, and I'm going to remove the lid. It's still going to keep cooking, but it's quite liquid now. I don't want the potatoes to turn into mush, by the way. We want them soft, but we don't want them to be mushy. It's been about 5 more minutes. This is, as you can see, is starting to thicken up. Once again, you drag the spatula through the sauce, the curry in this case, and you can see it leaves a trail. That means that it's done. Now we're going to add in the kefir. You can use buttermilk for this. You can even use yogurt. And now we're going to mound in the spinach. And this is going to add a lot of moisture to the dish as the spinach cooks down. So this needs to be cooked quite a while again with no lid on it, because we want to evaporate all the moisture out of the spinach. The spinach is now incorporated, and you can see this is looking like a spinach saag curry. So now we're going to put the lid on completely, turn the heat way down to 2, and let this simmer away until the potatoes are soft. That's probably about 10 more minutes. Now, it's also during this time that you're going to taste it and see, does it need more salt? Yes, it does. And brown sugar. And we'll just continue cooking it until those potatoes are the consistency that you want them. And the heat, again, is very low. It's on 2. And we're keeping it covered because we don't want to reduce this anymore. It's already pretty thick. However, if your curry, for whatever reason, at this point is not thick, then leave the cover off by all means. Make it thicker. After you've got all the seasonings right, the final step here is, with it on a low simmer, you're going to add the shrimp to it. And you just want to poach the shrimp in it. You don't want to overcook them so they become like rubber. These go in at the end because they're not going to take very much cooking. Just a couple minutes of cooking and the shrimp will be done and the whole thing will be ready. Also look for my cocktail book, Cocktails of the South Pacific and Beyond, Advanced Mixology, available through Amazon online.